Good evening, colleagues. Welcome to this evening's meeting. For those of you who've arrived late, you're very welcome. Item 1, announcements by the Mayor and Chief Executive. I've just got a few announcements before we begin. I'd just like to announce that Carol Stump, who was Chief Librarian, has been awarded an MBE in the New Year's Honours List for services to public libraries. I would also like to thank Carol Stump on behalf of the Council for her services to public libraries throughout her long career. Also recognise the invaluable contribution that she has made to library colleagues during the COVID-19 pandemic, providing essential services to our communities. Okay, can we just settle down and have a bit of respect when we're in the meeting, please? So I'd like to provide for her providing essential services to our communities, as well as to the work as she did as President of Libraries, connected to supporting people and to reconnect and rebuild post-pandemic. I would also like to announce that there will be a memorial service for the M62 bombing, and this is significant this year as it is 50 years since the event, and the service will be held at Hartshead Moor Services on Sunday the 4th of February at 10:45. You will notice that there's a different mace in front of me this evening. This is the Spenborough mace. As I've said previously, I've now used all of the maces to represent all of Kirklees and all of the members here and your communities, because I'm very inclusive and embrace all. Thank you for that. Apologies for... Chief Executive, any announcements? No, thank you. Apologies for absence. Councillor Sokal. Oh, am I supposed to turn them on? Sorry, we got it on at the end. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have apologies tonight from Councillor Taylor, Councillor Ali, Councillor Firth and Councillor Gregg. Councillor Stephen is held up at work at the moment, so she'll try and get here later on.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Munro. Councillor Cooper. Thank you. Item 3. I move that the minutes of the meeting of Council held on the 13th of December 2023 be approved as a correct record. Is that second? Thank you, Councillor Dowd. Can we please vote by a show of hands? All those in favour? Against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That is carried. Item 4, declarations of interest. Members who have any disclosable pecuniary interests which would prevent them from discussing or voting on any item should disclose these interests now. Are there any interests to declare? There may be one to declare under the motion of school uniforms as an other interest. It won't prevent you from speaking or commenting, but you just need to complete the relevant form if you are a governor or something at a school. Thank you. Item 5, petitions from members of the Council. Are there any petitions from members of the Council? No. Item 6, deputations and petitions from members of the public. There are no deputations this evening. Petitions. We have one petition this evening from Ashley Robinson. Welcome to the meeting. Please introduce yourself, advise the Council of the subject matter of your petition, what it requests, and then you can pass it on to the clerk beside you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Robinson and I live in the Linley area. I'm here on behalf of almost 300 residents of the Linley ward who have signed a petition against the Council's proposed massive increase to permit parking charges. This petition was opened recently and a number of signatories are growing daily. The current system of a one-off payment of £15 per car for length of ownership has been in place for years to cover the cost of administrating the scheme. Under the proposed scheme, residents would be expected to pay £50 per permit each year, more than tripling the cost in a single year and representing a tenfold increase over the average length a car is kept for 3 years. Residents are enraged by this proposal and cannot see how penalising people for parking outside their own homes can be justified. Residents in Linley are faced with particularly difficult challenges as many of the parking permit areas are around Huddersfield Royal Infirmary, busy high streets and local schools. Comments left on the survey clearly show residents believe this is an unfair and unjustifiable tax on already stretched households as they struggle with so many other pressures in the cost of living crisis that we all face. They clearly articulate how they think this is unfair to people who must pay to park on their own street. Some comments from residents include, it's extortionate. It would mean £150 a year. The permit parking is not policed properly, as most days I struggle to park when cars with no permit holders are taking the space. I'm an old age pensioner, finding the cost of living difficult. My only luxury is my car. With the cost of living affecting everyone, every penny I spend I have to account for. I literally do not have the money to pay to park outside my own house if it goes to £50. It's utterly outrageous. I should not be punished. This is a regressive tax that targets many residents already struggling with the cost of living crisis and will hit people on low and fixed incomes very hard. We urge the Council to reconsider this unfair and unjustifiable increase which punishes residents for parking on their own street.
Thank you. In accordance with Council Procedure Rule 9.3, I direct that the subject matter of the petition be referred to the appropriate Service Director for investigation. Thank you very much. Item 7, public question time. There are no public questions this evening. Councillor Scott.
We bring the motion on Gaza, item 16, also item 17, item 18 and item 19 forward for debate earlier under this area.
Is that agreed?
Yep.
Seconded? A show of hands. We're happy with that? Okay, that's carried. Councillor Hall.
Could I please move that we also move forward motion at item number 15 as to displaying election posters?
Is that seconded?
Reserve the right. Thank you.
Can we vote by show of hands? All those in favour of moving? Okay. Those against? Unfortunately, not on this occasion. Right, which one are we on? Okay, item 16. Motion under Council Procedure Rule 14 as to a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Councillor Cooper.
The horrific events in Gaza have shocked people around the world, and thousands here in Kirklees. Hundreds have attended meetings to hear first-hand testimony from people who've come from the conflict in Gaza. Local people have marched through our streets in protest, signed petitions, and raised thousands of pounds for medicines and food for the people of Gaza. Let's be clear that in calling out the Israeli government for their atrocities in Gaza, we are not in any shape or form excusing the atrocities perpetrated by Hamas on October the 7th. I have heard no one locally seek to excuse the murder of innocent civilians by Hamas. But this did not begin on October the 7th. The Palestinian people have been living under the oppression of the Israeli state for decades, and the Israeli government are in breach of international law by continuing to occupy Palestine. Over 30,000 people have been killed, a large proportion of whom are children. 90% of homes have been damaged or destroyed. Targets of the Israeli Defence Force have included desalination plants that provide drinking water, sewerage systems, churches, mosques, hospitals and schools. Palestinians have been killed in so-called safe areas where they've been directed to by the Israeli government. There are no safe areas in Gaza. Electricity, food and water have been deliberately denied to the population by the occupying Israeli forces. This does not appear to be in any shape or form a targeted operation. It is carpet bombing, and the charge of genocide, whatever the Israeli government's stated intentions are, is utterly justified. The Israeli government actions are the equivalent of the UK government flattening West Belfast in response to IRA bombings. They cannot be justified. And for anyone who says that this is not a local issue, we know that conflict displaces people, and as such, as much as we should be welcoming to refugees and asylum seekers, we should also be doing all we can to call out oppression and call for peace in the world so they can live in their own homes and communities without threat of violence. In the Green Party, we have a phrase, think global, act local. That is usually applied to climate change, but is relevant in this situation in Gaza. Many of us locally opposed apartheid in South Africa, where black people were treated as second-class citizens. We call for sanctions against South African goods, divestment from South African companies, and promoted boycotts of South African goods. Palestinians are treated as second-class, displaced, harassed, and sometimes murdered by illegal settlers. This is a form of apartheid, and it should be opposed by divestment, by sanctions, or by boycotts. We can and should act locally to show our opposition to oppression around the globe, and we should definitely not be fueling that aggression by providing arms to the Israeli government. We're calling for a ceasefire because that is where peace begins, not where it ends. We know from conflicts around the world that if there is to be progress to a lasting peace, then the fighting has to stop. That is when negotiations can begin. Kirklees represents 500,000 people. Let us show, as the representative body for those people, that we stand against the oppressor and for the oppressed. Please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Is that seconded? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Richards. Councillor Budd.
Move the Labour amendment on Gaza. I associate myself with the comments made already, including the mention of the deplorable acts of October the 7th and the 16-year blockade of Gaza. While the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that all people are born free and equal in dignity and rights, Israel continues to restrict freedom and undermine equality for Palestinian citizens of Israel, as well as those in Gaza and the West Bank. What kind of existence is it where one side continues fighting for freedom and autonomy, and on the other side, the Israeli people who are free and have rights continue to live in fear? The bombardment of Gaza is in its third month, and many commentators are calling it a carnage. Tens of thousands dead, mainly children, and many more under the rubble. The people of Gaza are not Hamas, yet they are targeted with ferocity. There is now a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. No food, water, or medical supplies. Amputations and operations are being carried out without anesthesia. The international community must ramp up efforts for A, a lasting ceasefire, and B, ramping up humanitarian support. Finally, Mr. Mayor, a two-state solution with a recognized Palestinian state is the way we ensure something like this never happens again. Peace is not something needed for moral reasons. It's not a question of virtue, but an absolute necessity. And who is most in need of a Palestinian state? Israel. Because the best guarantee of peace and security for Israel is the existence of a Palestinian state. that forms part of the international order, respects international law and respects a joint coexistence. This is what we must invest in, and this is what must happen now for peace to prevail. Otherwise, history will not judge us kindly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Are there any other amendments? Councillor Lawson.
Rise to move the Liberal Democrat amendment to the substantive motion. I just wanted to say a few words on that amendment on the permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Firstly, there was some debate before today on whether or not this was a council matter or not. I know that conversation took place. I think the Liberal Democrat group's position is best summed up by saying that while we understand this is an international situation with a limited scope for influence on our behalf, the events unfolding in Gaza and now in the widening sphere in the Middle East affect so many people in our borough and cause so much anxiety that we must at least set out ours and our parliamentary parties' outlines on this. At the top of any agenda, of course, must be the lasting bilateral ceasefire, and that should be done as soon as can be humanly arranged. There can be no justifying of the actions of Hamas last October or the IDF in the 103 days since. All the innocent people caught up in the violence have a right to our compassion, and there can be no differentiating between those killed or taken hostage by Hamas or those civilians killed or displaced by Israeli forces. It has always been and remains our firm belief that the only way a peace can be preserved is by a two-state solution, so that each state can act as equals in a search for a fair and just settlement. It has been a hallmark of this conflict, I hesitate to call it a war, that events have moved swiftly. Since the substantive motion was entered, a deeply worrying set of events has unfolded. The current use of UK forces without the parliamentary approval to attack Houthi locations calls up doubts about the validity of those actions, and indeed the dangers of those in the wider region wishing to engage in proxy conflicts for their own benefit. The Liberal Democrat MP, Layla Moran, the first MP of Palestinian heritage, has publicly talked about these dangers, and Liberal Democrats are tabling a motion to bring these decisions about military actions in front of the Commons. The humanitarian crisis must come to an end, and I'm heartened to hear that a deal has been struck to allow more, not all, but more humanitarian aid into the region by Qatari mediators. I would hope that this is the direction that the honest brokers would take. Find understanding and common ground, establish meaningful communication, encourage bravery, political and personal, that kind of bravery that lets us speak to someone today that yesterday we called an enemy. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Is that seconded? Second. Thank you, Councillor Marchington. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to open up this for debate, so all of the two motions will be discussed. So if you want to put your name down on the list to discuss and debate the amendments or the motion, and then I will take them in some kind of order as best we can. And then we will vote on the Labour amendment first when we've concluded the debate. Councillor Musrat Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking to the Labour amendment. I want to start by acknowledging the atrocious crimes committed by Hamas that took place on the 7th of October 2023. But that tragic loss of life does not justify the extent and scope of Israel's response in Gaza nor the West Bank. The indiscriminate collective punishment of civilians has led to around 24,000 people being massacred in an intense attack that is described as unprecedented. Nearly half of those killed are innocent children. At least 8,000 people are still missing, presumed dead under the rubble or decomposing on streets where they were killed. Many people are buried in mass graves without being identified. Thousands of others have been maimed and injured and left without adequate medical care. More than half of all homes have been destroyed. Some 80% of the population has been forcibly displaced into increasingly smaller areas. More than 1 million people have sought refuge in humanitarian camps across Gaza, creating overcrowded, undignified, unhygienic conditions. Other people have nowhere to shelter and find themselves on the streets. We've heard of reports of Israel's intent to resettle Gazans in the Congo Republic. If you take an entire group of people to a far-off land, then if that's not ethnic cleansing, I don't know what is. No one would expect a nation not to respond to the events of 7th of October, but there is no proportionality. And what other conclusion could you come to when every house, school, church, hospital is a target? Rescuing hostages doesn't appear to be a propriety either. Netanyahu disclosed his genocidal intent when he made a biblical reference to the Amalek. This rhetoric is often used by the Israeli far right to justify the murders of Palestinians. Israel has killed more children than any other conflict in modern times. For the first time ever in history, the victims of atrocities have been able to broadcast live their own murders. A traumatised population crammed into smaller and smaller land with no water, medical help or food have reached out to the rest of the world begging for help. This atrocity will be remembered for decades to come. There's no way out of Gaza. No safe zones like there are in the Ukraine. Humanitarian camps have been struck on numerous occasions, killing UN personnel and aid workers. Israel is deliberately imposing telecommunications blackouts on Gaza and restricting access by fact-finding bodies and the international media. Aid is still being limited. There is little water and energy and minimal medical care. UN human rights experts state that not only is Israel killing and causing irreparable harm against Palestinian civilians with its indiscriminate bombardments, but Israel is also knowingly and intentionally imposing a high rate of disease, prolonged malnutrition, dehydration and starvation by destroying civilian infrastructure. The things that sustain life are not there. The Israelis are now using starvation and dehydration as weapons of war. We will all be asked by future generations as to what we did to oppose this genocide. It's clear to the world that Israel's intent is to destroy the entire region, raze the entire territory to the ground and possibly render it uninhabitable for decades to come. It is impossible to come to any other conclusion that this is a genocide. We need to do everything in our power to call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, release hostages on both sides, and call for an end to the 25 years of oppression to pave the way for lasting peace. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor Moore.
Is that on? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to start by saying what an honour it was to be elected in May of this year to represent the good people of Dewsbury East in this chamber. While I welcome the Labour ceasefire amendment on the ongoing humanitarian disaster in Gaza, we now need to be discussing the future of Gaza following the indiscriminate carpet bombing and systematic destruction by Israel, which has led to the genocidal massacre of some 30,000 Palestinians, with the majority being women, children and infants. No doubt history will be less than kind when it writes about the displacement of over 1 million families the bombing of hospitals, refugee camps, and of those innocent families who left their homes and belongings to arrive at places designated as safe, then only to be massacred by Israeli bombs. Of course, it is not just our silence in the so-called civilised West that our history books will write about, but also the fact that these bombs were manufactured in our countries and exported to Israel to carry out its genocidal campaign against Palestinian children and civilians. The Palestinian cause has long been ingrained in the DNA of the Labour movement. It's something we've championed for decades. This is precisely why so many members like myself feel utterly depressed by the stand taken by our leadership. As Paul indicates very strongly, Keir Starmer will become the UK Prime Minister in 2024. As per the petition compiled by my good friend and former MP for Dewsbury Shire, Malik, I'll be writing tomorrow to ask Keir Starmer to make a real commitment to the long-suffering people of Palestine and to recognise the state of Palestine, something already formally done by some 139 countries. Given our party's stated commitment to social justice, the rule of law, international systems and its conventions, equity, fairness, non-discrimination, prosperity and peace, I urge Keir Starmer to take some strong and immediate action to help protect the very concept of a two-state solution, lest these words become hollow platitudes. Britain should recognise the state of Palestine out of the political and historical responsibility that it entails and to protect the two-state solution. As such, an immediate recognition pledge for a Palestine statehood, which formed part of Labour's manifesto in both 2017 and 2019, and was even supported prior to this by Ed Miliband, and this is desperately required. As people of conscience, on behalf of Labour Party members in Dewsbury, we now demand that Labour pledges that it will commit to recognising a Palestinian state in its election manifesto and within the first 100 days of forming a Labour government.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Before I go on to what I want to say, first to say that any war, any conflict, any loss of life is to be regretted, no matter what the conflict, because loss of life is not what we want to see. I do understand as well, perfectly, the strength of feeling that some members have about this issue. I think we all feel very strongly about it. You can't turn on the telly without being affected by the situation that's going on. However, I don't feel that either the motion or the amendments are necessary at the moment. Unfortunately, I believe that all this is doing is politicising a very tragic issue. We've got a motion, we've even got 2 amendments to a motion, all saying slightly different things. And I think, if truth be told, if we asked opinion in this chamber, you'd get 69 slightly different takes on what's happening in the Middle East at the moment. And therefore, passing a motion is not going to do anything. It's not going to achieve anything. It's not going to affect things in the Middle East. The original motion has a resolution which will write a letter. Gee whiz. The Labour amendment, we're going to write a letter. Great. The Lib Dem amendment has no resolution at all, not even a letter. And I have to say, I think time would have been better spent at this council meeting discussing more proximate and immediate issues such as the council's financial difficulties. Ironically, the one motion that was presented on the order paper tonight, over which Kirklees has any responsibility at all, the other 3 parties have decided to stick at the end, so probably we won't get to debate it. Now, I have to say that Bradford Council has been quite roundly and rightly pilloried for spending an awful lot of its time talking about things over which it has no control. We know there's a groundswell of opinion on this, but it's nothing that we can affect as Kirklees. And I suggest that we shouldn't spend much more time debating it. Let's get on to the things that we need to be doing, which is holding the administration to account for for the running of the council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Amin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yesterday I wrote my speech and it was 31,000. That total is 32,000 today. That's the number of Gazan residents that have been killed and are missing since October the 7th. That's approximate combination of the population of both Ashbrow and half of Greenhead wards.
I understand. It'll be dealt with. Yeah.
This amounts to 10,000 children. That's 100 per day. Yet, leaders of Israel, UK, USA claim self-defence. 370 schools in Gaza damaged and destroyed. Yet Israel, UK, USA claim self-defence. 94 hospitals and healthcare facilities attacked, destroyed. Yet Israel, UK, USA claim self-defence. More than 1,000 children have lost limbs. Yet UK, Israel, USA claim self-defence. 1.1 million children denied access to adequate humanitarian assistance. Yet Israel, UK, USA claim self-defence. These children are paying the price of a war they have no part in. They are terrified, hurt, maimed, displaced, at risk of starvation, disease and famine. I recently watched an interview of a Palestinian child. These are his words. We didn't live our childhood. As children, we only see rockets and witness bombardment. Death follows us, murder haunts us. Every rocket sent by Israel to Gaza is meant to kill us. We came from the north to the centre. They moved us to the south. We don't know where to go. Death follows us. Murder haunts us. What do we do? Where do we go? The Arab and the world look upon us and do nothing for us. So many Palestinians were killed in the 1948 war so they could occupy Palestine. This war is worse. This war is the second Nakba for Palestinians. Since October the 7th, 100 journalists have been killed. This is a rate significantly higher than that's what has occurred in conflict in the past 100 years, exceeding the entirety of World War II. Yet Israel, USA, the UK claim self-defence. 300 medical personnel have been killed, 342 injured. Yet UK, USA, Israel claim self-defence. 152 UN staff have been killed, yet UK, USA, Israel claim self-defence. Many people of colour, such as myself, may have felt proud that the UK has had its very first BAME Prime Minister. Basically making history. I don't feel particularly proud. He won't just be known for this, but he'll also be known for his current policies hurting the UK economy and the working class, who are struggling to survive. Never in the UK history have we witnessed councils going into bankruptcy and cuts to budgets placing pressure on services. I pay my taxes to run the UK economy and not to fund the unjust killing of innocents. I say no to providing ammunition, bombs and soldiers in the killing of innocents. Rishi Sunak needs to be held accountable and charged with war crimes. He needs to do the right thing and resign as a disgrace to the BAME community. Let me be clear, dropping bombs in the hope of killing Hamas is not justifiable. This is not self-defence. The killing of innocent women, children, elderly is massively disproportionate and no way justifiable. UK leaders must do the right thing, be on the right side of history, call for an end to the killing, force Israel to stop, recognise the state of Palestine, return the borders originally agreed, ending settler land grabbing, and together with USA and Israel, they need to rebuild Palestine. They need to take ownership of that, because if they can supply the bombs, they can rebuild as well. Be on the right side of history. I'm just going to end with a poem by Najwan Darwish. I write the land. I want to write the land. I want the words to be the land itself. But I am not a statue, But I'm just a statue the Romans carved and the Arabs forgot. Colonizers stole my severed hand and stuck it in a museum. No matter, I still want to write it. The land my words are very rare, and silence is my story. Just to end, in our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Min. Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'm speaking in support of the Labour Group amendment on this motion. This is a real concern for our constituents, many of whom are traumatised by the ever-unfolding atrocities that are impacting on civilians. Local people are hearing horrendous situations day in and day out from family members and from friends who themselves are caught up in that conflict. In addition, I'm aware of local people who are anxious about their own safety and that of their children. We know that there's been a rise nationally in the number of Islamophobic and anti-Semitic incidents, and this breeds a climate of fear and distrust. We must combat this. We can't allow this to happen in our communities. The government must advocate for an immediate permanent ceasefire. We must seriously engage with the international community to bring about a stable and sustainable peace through that two-state solution. We all recognise that the scale of the task cannot be underestimated, but I consider it our duty to galvanise this government into prioritising this crisis on behalf of innocent civilian victims. And a bit like Zarina, I'm going to focus on the emphasis of urgency. The emphasis of urgency for me is to remind us of the plight of innocent children. I'm going to focus on the suffering of those children in Gaza, but we mustn't forget the children killed and kidnapped by Hamas, who did nothing to invite such suffering. As a mother and a grandma, I find it abhorrent that children in Gaza are dying daily. Some are killed outright, some are buried alive, and others are injured and suffered terribly before passing away. Others have suffered life-changing injuries. At the same time, access to medical treatment is dire. The hospitals that are left lack basics, drugs, anaesthetics, power. Food and water have already been mentioned. They're in short supply. Children are going hungry. Insufficient aid is just not getting in. Children are living through or witnessing horrific events. The mental trauma these youngsters are having will cause lasting psychological damage. Children are being displaced, fleeing from their homes. Some have had to flee again and again, looking for safety. Children are being orphaned. I can't imagine how unbelievably frightening it must be to live through such traumatic events without even the love and guidance of your parents. For many, formal education is on hold, schools have been destroyed, and the daily battle to find safe shelter, food and water all take priority. These children need us to do everything in our power to advocate for a permanent, peaceful solution now. I support the amendment of the Labour Group, and I know, although my councillor colleague, Nosheen Dad, is not allowed to speak due to her role, she feels as I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey and Councillor Dad. Councillor Safdar, please.
Sadly, what we are witnessing in the occupied Palestinian territories right now is the second Nakba. Imagine a territory without Hamas. That would be the West Bank. In the West Bank right now, we are seeing more illegal land grabs. We are seeing more farmers, civilians, children being beaten, kidnapped, and taken hostage. Hostage taking on both sides of the divide is wrong. It's a war crime. This cycle of violence, of occupation, must end. Now, for all those who want to follow what's really going on, I ask you, this is going to surprise many people, as a Muslim, I'm asking you to follow the Jewish Voice for Peace, to follow the Israeli human rights organization Bet Salem. Reach out to Jewish and Israeli peace activists. They're the voices we must amplify. We must never veer towards anti-Semitism. No matter how angry we get, we must work with Israeli peace activists. Because that two-state solution, which is vital for the future of Israeli and Palestinian children, whether they are Muslim, Christian, Jewish, those children are the future, and we must empower those children. We must campaign for the release of Mandela-like characters. Marwan Barghouti, that's a name. Please remember, look into that name. I've worked many years for Palestinian-linked charities. Barghouti is a name, he will be a future Mandela, God willing. We need people like Barghouti to be released and work with the Americans, with the EU, with the Qataris, and this is controversial, with the Iranians. We negotiated with Sinn Féin, with IRA. It was difficult. The Major government did that. The Blair government did that. We have to negotiate sometimes with unpalatable people to reach solutions. Now, everyone in Gaza today is going hungry. There are 2.2 million people surviving day by day on almost nothing. They are routinely going without meals. The NGOs I work with, I volunteer with, my family donate with, my friends donate to, they are in tears in their offices. The desperate search for food, mothers are struggling to feed their babies. Newborn babies are not getting nutrition from the mother's milk. The Gaza Strip was already in the throes of a terrible humanitarian crisis before the war, before Israel's 17-year blockade. 90% of the population relied on humanitarian aid. Now, the late, great Archbishop Desmond Tutu said that my concern is also what the Israelis are doing to themselves, to their children. They are not aware that when you carry out dehumanizing policies, those policies dehumanize the perpetrator. Of course, he was referring to decades of occupation, humiliation, human rights abuses. Now, some on the hard right, I'm not referring to anyone in this room, say, you Muslims do not denounce Assad. I have consistently denounced butchers like Assad, like Putin. Like the Iranian human rights abuses are also appalling. We equally call out Saudi human rights abuses and war crimes. We call out butchers, dictators, and so-called Democrats who murder and maim and spread fire from above. Now, if you denounce hostile states like Russia, you're applauded. If we raise the Ukrainian flag, we are applauded. But if we raise the Palestinian flag, sometimes we're called lefty trouble causers. Now, the Pope is begging for an immediate ceasefire. I'm just an already working class lad from Lockwood. Why do I know? But I'm hoping someone in power will hear these words. If we were to keep our reputation as a civilized democracy that respects the rule of law, every member of every party here must write to your party leaders and demand that our leaders call for an immediate ceasefire. Because what answer will we give to the dead? What answer will we give to those children who buried their siblings? I was doing a live broadcast with the charity a few weeks ago. And on the big screen behind me, I saw an image of a child. He was about 11. And our 11-year-old nieces, nephews, grandchildren, they hold PlayStations and footballs and toys. This child was holding the body of his dead baby brother. And his baby brother was missing a foot. And unlike some trolls on the hard right, it wasn't a doll, it was a real baby that had been decapitated. And the weapons used in that war crime, because that baby wasn't part of Hamas, a group I consistently condemn. I've always been praying for the Palestinian Authority, the legitimate authority, to negotiate with the international community. I condemn Hamas unequivocally again and again. But that baby, who was not part of Hamas, what was his crime? The tears rolling down the face of that 11-year-old child, waiting in a queue, in a morgue, surrounded by exhausted morgue staff, will never leave me. The image of that father carrying the limbs of his dead children in a body bag will never leave me. Acts of terror by appalling groups like Hamas do not excuse ethnic cleansing, because ethnic cleansing is taking place right now in Ukraine and in Palestine. Apologies, Mr. Mayor, but it's a controversial term, but sanctions worked against South Africa. As a friend, we must try to rein in Israel. I'm going to leave you with the words of, I've got so much more to say, but I'm going to leave you with the words now of a remarkably brave, honest and well-read Israeli journalist, someone I admire immensely, Gideon Levy. He said that a real friend does not pick up the bill for an addict's drugs. He packs that friend off to rehab instead. Today, only those who speak up against Israel's policies, who denounce the occupation, the blockade and the war, are the nation's true friends. We must rein this democracy in for their own sake. There must be a two-state solution. We must work with both parties to stop this conflict right now.
Thank you, Councillor Safdar. Councillor Zaman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm supporting the Labour's amendment. The violence we've all witnessed in Israel and Gaza since the attacks of 7th of October has horrified us all. The impact on innocent civilians is heartbreaking. Our hearts ache as we watch the devastations taking place, particularly in Gaza, on a daily basis on our television screens. Where is the humanity in all this, I ask? I want to condemn Hamas's brutal attack. Yes, Hamas is a terrorist organisation. Yes, their activities do need to stop. But the loss of over 24,000 people, half of which are reported to be children, is no justification. We have to condemn the atrocities being committed literally on a daily basis. Killing, injuring and displacing thousands of innocent and helpless people. The cycle of violence against innocent civilians needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. Our thoughts and prayers for peace go out to all those who have suffered in this horrific situation. As a mother, it's heartbreaking thinking of how the parents of those children must feel when they're playing out. Which child knows that playing out in the wrong area might get them injured or killed? Children who play under safety nets prevent tear gas canisters falling on them. Children whose experiences have led to 91% of them suffering some form of conflict-related trauma. 75% of them wetting their beds, and 70% of them having nightmares. Despite this, they remain children with dreams, hopes, and aspirations. Children who are growing up without parents, siblings, and other relatives. They are the ones that are paying the price in this conflict, and they are the ones that should be at the forefront of our thoughts and prayers when we are talking about this conflict and finding a way forward. The events of recent weeks have led us to the height of a humanitarian catastrophe, and the world can no longer wait to act. It's our collective responsibility, and we need to do something about it. Therefore, we call on our leadership, the Prime Minister, the UN Security Council, and actors on the ground to urgently agree to an immediate action to ensure ceasefire to prevent further loss of civilian life, and to prioritise the perseverance of human life. Above all, and the work towards achieving a peaceful resolution. As community leaders, we are proactively supporting our residents and speaking to faith and community groups and working to protect our communities who are facing rising hate crime and racially motivated violence. As Labour councillors across the country, we ask the UK government to call for an immediate ceasefire, to allow humanitarian aid to reach all who need it, and to every action needed to ensure that a lasting and just peace is secured for the region and the wider world. Labour councillors have been very strong and firm in their views, and we have been communicating our views at the highest level. But we've seen very little change globally. So therefore, we ask Rishi Sunak to please take action. We cannot stay silent, even while the sick are dying, accessing urgent care in hospitals which are not safe. Everyone who is suffering deserves our empathy. We stand with you, demanding peace, because one thing we all know, that violence is never the answer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, thank you, Councillor Zvan. Councillor Kolchik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We cannot ignore the Israeli military bombardment in Gaza, killing thousands of innocent children, women, and men. This air seized the ground offensive by Israel's armed force cannot be excused by conflicting the action of Hamas with the Palestine people and the resulting widespread devastation being inflicted on Gaza. Indeed, the actions of the Israeli government of collective punishment on Palestine is barbaric. Denying civilians basic necessities such as water, food, and fuel is against international law. Let's not forget, occupying forces are responsible for the welfare of the people and lands they are controlling. Surely, we cannot continue to be hypocritic, lecturing countries involving in state-on-state conflicts, such as Ukraine's, expressing our horror at civilians being targeted by military action, yet turn a blind eye to Israeli actions in Gaza. Let's stop these double standards. I urge members to support a call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and allow international agencies full access and provide adequate aid to Palestinians forced to flee their homes, trying to survive hellish conditions because of Israel's massive military action against them. Israel must engage in a genuine effort for a two-state solution and not continue with their colonial-style land grab on Palestine land. If we continue to turn a blind eye to the mass killing of civilians in Gaza by one of the most powerful military powers in the world, supplying them with yet more money and weapons, this conflict will never end, and innocent people will needlessly die as a result of our cowardice to call out injustice in the name of political expansion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Anwar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is a privilege to appear here on behalf of the residents of Kirklees in this motion of exceptional importance. It is a case that underscores the very essence of our shared humanity. Gaza is one of the two constituent territories of the occupied Palestinian territories occupied by Israel since 1967. It is a narrow strip of approximately 365 square kilometers, as seen in many maps now displayed around the world. Despite formally disengaging in 2005, Israel continues to exercise control over the airspace, territorial waters, land crossings, water and electricity, and civilian infrastructure in Gaza, as well as over the key governmental functions. Entry and exits by air and sea to Gaza is prohibited. With Israel operating the only two crossing points, Gaza, which is one of the most densely populated places in the world, is home to approximately 2.3 million Palestinians. Almost half of them are children. For the past 100+ days, Israel has subjected Gaza to what has been described as one of the heaviest conventional bombing campaigns in the history of modern warfare. Palestinians in Gaza are being killed by Israeli weaponry and bombs from air, land and sea. They are also at immediate risk of death by starvation, dehydration and disease as a result of the ongoing siege by Israel. The destruction of Palestinian towns, the insufficient aid being allowed through to the Palestinian population, and the impossibility of distributing this limited aid while bombs fall. This conduct renders essentials to life unobtainable. These acts are documented in detail of South Africa's application and confirmed by reliable, often UN sources. It is impossible for me to recount all of them. I will highlight only some in order to illustrate the pattern of genocidal conduct. The United Nations statistics are up to date to the 9th of January. The first genocidal act committed by Israel is the mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza in violation of Article 2.A of the Genocide Convention. As the UN Secretary General explained 6 weeks ago, the level of Israel's killing is so extensive that nowhere is safe in Gaza. As I stand before you today, 25,210 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces during the sustained attacks over the last 3 months, at least 70% of whom are believed to be women and children. Some 7,000 Palestinians are still missing, presumed dead under the rubble. Palestinians in Gaza are subjected to relentless bombing wherever they go. They are killed in their homes, in places where they seek shelter, in hospitals, in school, in mosques, in churches, and as they try to find food and water for their families, they have been killed if they fail to evacuate in the places to which they fell led. And even while they attempted to flee along Israeli-declared safe routes, the level of killing is so extensive that those whose bodies are found are buried in mass graves often unidentified. These killings are nothing short of destruction of Palestinian life. It is inflicted deliberately. No one is spared, not even newborn babies. The scale of Palestinian child's killing in Gaza is such that the UN chiefs have described it as a graveyard for children. The devastation is intended to go and has laid waste to Gaza beyond acceptable legal, let alone humane justification. As I came home yesterday, my 5-year-old daughter, who was watching the news the previous night with me, saw images of what was going on in Gaza. She said to me, "Dad, what have you done about the videos you was watching?" That absolutely broke me. So today, with a heavy heart, I have been an active member and supporter of the Labour Party all my life. Since the age of 14, I believe in its views and principles, but unfortunately, under the current leadership, the Labour Party has let me down. I can no longer be part of this institution after its sport of an apartheid state that is killing thousands of innocent people. I've been killed over 25,000 people in the last 100 days. It's with a heavy heart I leave the party I always loved. And I believe I might rejoin in the future if its leadership is changed and the view on Palestine and places like Kashmir and Ukraine have been made. This decision was made by the residents that elected me in Dewsbury West. It's not a light decision I have taken today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anwar. Councillor Docrat.
First and foremost, before I start, I just want to say I'm really saddened to hear of our colleague, Councillor Amar's decision to leave the party. It really saddens me. I fully understand and appreciate the pressures that many of us, like Councillor Amar, has been under over the last 3 months. It's been, particularly in certain parts of the district, it's really saddening news. And I'm sure many of our colleagues will understand his decision. Moving on, can I just take this opportunity first and foremost to thank the people of Batley East for electing me as their councillor at the recent by-election in August. I'm talking to the Labour amendment. From the 7th of October to the current day, the world and Kirklees residents have watched in horror as the escalation of the conflict in Gaza. Personally, I've never found myself so challenged to come to terms with the position this government, including my party, have adopted in relation to the conflict. We cannot allow blind support for Israel, whatever it does, and literally throw the Palestinians to the bombs. The persistent failure to oppose any aspect of government policy in relation to this conflict, its persistent failure to hear the cries of the millions of people who come out week after week to highlight the death and destruction of the Palestinian people, the genocide being executed in Gaza of women, children, and the collective punishment of a whole nation, the whole destruction of a land through blanket bombing with no regard for human life, the blind support for Israel's right to defend without any regard for proportionality, the total neglect of the death and destruction of Palestinian people in the West Bank, in Gaza every 10 minutes. We know, we've heard so many times, day in, day out, every 10 minutes a Palestinian child is killed, with some 13,000 plus children killed to date. Over 32,000 civilians are either missing or killed to date, and continues to increase. The blanket bombing of hospitals, schools, places of worship is nothing sacred. Where's the humanity in this world? Is this not genocide? Is this not barbarism? How do we actually qualify that? Equally, the huge disappointment, the UK government's abstention on the UK UN General Council is a moral failure and does not reflect the call for the call of the vast majority of Britons who are urging for a ceasefire now. This moment will be a stain on the conscience of humanity and the UK as population. Hamas's attack on Israel on 7th of October and the taking of hostages both deserve unreserved condemnation. But Hamas does not represent the long-suffering of Palestinian people. We mourn the loss of all innocent life and innocent civilians. However, as the UN Secretary General stated, those appalling acts of terror did not take place in a vacuum. As the South African Council stated only last week, 75 years of historical injustice against the Palestinian people. This included the Nakba in 1948, the ongoing denial of Palestinian rights to self-determination, 56 years of occupation of Palestinian territories, 17 years of Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip. How decades of impunity have empowered a state, the State of Israel, to escalate its onslaught on the Palestinian people and their territories. South Africa's impassioned plea at the International Court of Justice echoes the collective voice of millions worldwide yearning for an end to the ongoing massacre. Their unwavering stance not only highlights the dire situation in Gaza, but also exposes the regrettable silence from those who continue to facilitate this siege, a crucial call to the international community for accountability and justice. We are in denial that the Israeli policies against the Palestinians meet the definition of apartheid. According to Rome's statute, despite all the inhumane conditions they have to endure, we as a nation condemn the actions of Russia and their atrocities in Ukraine. We flew the flags to show our support for the Ukrainians. It was and is right to call out Putin's actions. However, those who fly the Palestinian flag and are purged against, who dare publicly support the Palestinian cause. It's an issue of justice, politics and human rights. The Palestinians have every right to attain the rights that all other people enjoy. Majority of the British public backs a call for a ceasefire. They, like us, are witnessing the massacre of innocent civilians in Gaza. UN's humanitarian office issued a statement saying, if there is a hell on earth, it's Gaza. There should be no reason for calling for an unconditional ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian factions to save lives on both sides. How many more deaths are needed to convince us that this is the correct call now? Kirklees is a diverse area whose constituents select their elected officials under the assumption that their views are valued and heard. Let us hold our common values of compassion, protecting human life, social justice, and ensuring that international laws are upheld. I urge you to use our collective voice and power. Let's not waste any more time. Now is the time for the international community to pay heed to the calls of millions of people around the world and for Israel's war on Palestine to end. Now is the time to be bold and show that our district will not forsake the innocent civilians of Gaza. I urge you to stand on the right side of history. Now is the time to urge our government and the Labour Party to play its part in creating lasting peace, upholding its moral duty to those afflicted by this unnecessary bloodshed. Call for a permanent ceasefire now. Bring those responsible for war crimes, the genocide, to account. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dockbrack. Councillor Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak to the Labour amendment. As my colleagues have already stated, the violence we have all witnessed in Israel and Gaza since the attacks of 7th of October is not a new conflict. We must ensure that such horrifying events can never be repeated. This has been going on since the start of the occupation of Palestine by Israel. No one wants to see this conflict go on for a moment longer than necessary. There will not be a single person in this chamber today whose heart does not break for the death of innocent civilians, which is a consequence of any conflict. What is now a shocking state is that the Israeli government has been withholding essential humanitarian resources from Gaza, which has resulted in starvation and the denial of medicines to innocent civilians. We have seen the forced displacement of collective punishment of Palestinians, overcrowding and inadequate food, starvation, and water, shelter, and sanitation used as a weapon. Healthcare facilities and journalists targeted, and much more. The World Health Organization has already warned that there are ideal conditions for disease to spread. We need to actively ensure our leaders support partners on the ground in Gaza to help prevent the outbreak and spread of disease. The BBC reports that nearly 100,000 buildings have been damaged in Gaza. These include schools, hospitals, civilian properties. A large number of civilians are being killed, 2/3 of them women and children. Our own Foreign Secretary has warned Israel that civilian deaths in Gaza are too high. We now know the hospital treatment and hospital facilities in Gaza are virtually collapsed. A number of non-governmental organizations, such as Save the Children, are now working to evacuate children from Gaza to ensure that they receive urgent medical treatment in third countries. Civilians throughout Gaza face grave danger. Explosive remnants of war are rendering these uninhabitable. There is no effective protection of civilians. The healthcare system in Gaza is collapsing. Hospitals have turned into battlegrounds. Only 14 hospitals out of 36 facilities are even partially functional. 2 major hospitals in South Gaza are operating are 3 times their bed capacity and are running out of basic supplies of fuel. They are also sheltering thousands of displaced persons under these circumstances. More people will die untreated in the coming days and weeks. Nobody is safe in Gaza amid constant bombardment of the Israeli Defense Forces are without shelter or essentials to survive. I expect public order to completely break down soon due to desperate conditions and rendering even limited humanitarian assistance impossible. An even worse situation could unfold, including epidemic diseases, increased pressure for mass displacement into neighbouring countries, while delivery of supplies through Rafah continues. Quantities are insufficient and have dropped since the pause came to an end. We are simply unable to reach those in need inside Gaza. We are facing a severe risk of collapse of the humanitarian system. The system is fast deteriorating into a catastrophe with potentially irreversible implications for Palestinians as a whole and for peace and security in the region. Such an outcome must be avoided at all costs. Gaza must not be occupied in the long term. Palestinian people have the right to self-determination as much as any other and should be free to live in peace. We must press the government to condemn all forms of bloodshed and genocide, for peace talks for immediate and enduring ceasefire and a two-state solution to protect the civilians and Palestinians to be recognized in their own right. Please keep all those affected by these heinous crimes at the forefront of your minds, and please pray for their safety and well-being. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking to the Labour amendment. It is not easy to speak out. It is not easy to face criticism on a local, regional or national scale. But the fact is, I have been given a platform, and I feel if I do not use it, then I do not deserve it. I swore never to be silent whenever, wherever human beings endured suffering or humiliation. We must all take the right side. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victims. Silence encourages the tormentor and never the tormented. Sometimes we must interfere when human lives are endangered, when human dignity is in jeopardy, local and national borders and sensitivities become irrelevant. Whenever children, men, women are persecuted because of their race, religion or political views. That place must at the moment become the centre of the universe. Members are here before this chamber, and while it's not easy to speak out, we must continue to break that silence on the hell that has been rained down for over 100 days and counting on Gaza. I condemn Hamas's atrocities on October the 7th, but that does not justify the disproportionate response the world is witnessing. I'm just going to share a few rhetoric and quotes from the Israeli government. Utterly destroy all they have and spare them not, but slay them both, man, women and infant and suckling. And that was from Benjamin Netanyahu. This is an entire nation out there that is responsible, said Isaac Herzog. There will be no electricity, no food, no water and no fuel, and everything will be closed, and we are fighting against human animals and we are acting accordingly. We are fighting against human animals and Gaza won't return to what it was before. We will eliminate everything, said the Israeli Defence Minister. Human beasts are dealt with accordingly. Israel has imposed a total blockade on Gaza, said the army official. Use doomsday weapons against Gaza. is what was quoted in the Israel Middle East News on October the 10th. Annihilate Gaza now, now. Gaza needs to turn into Dresden, yes, said an Israeli politician. Invest this energy in one thing, erasing all of Gaza from the face of the earth. Gaza should be erased, said a former information minister. There are many more, but the few I've quoted state the Israel's government's position. This is horrific because innocent people and Palestinian civilians are being killed. Israel is in repeated violation of international law. Gaza is continued to be the graveyard of children, women, men. A child's life is taken every 10 minutes. Israel claims to act in self-defense, carpet bombing civilians, collective punishment, massacring children in their thousands, killing medical professionals, healthcare workers, aid workers, and the press. This is not defense. The world sees Israel's actions as barbaric, hateful, and cowardly war crimes. And anybody can say they didn't see, and nobody can say they didn't see, nobody can say they didn't hear, and nobody can say they didn't know. This is happening in full sight of the world. A Palestinian pastor, Munthan Isaac, addressed his congregation and the world, and he said, and I quote, "This is far by maybe the greatest, the biggest blow we have received." But he said, no apologies will be accepted after the genocide. What has been done, and I want you to look in the mirror and ask yourself, where was I when Gaza was going through a genocide? And anyone with power and influence, I state, what type of world did you gift me? The future generations and the one after. A world filled with injustice, hate, pain, and destruction. I am certain you will enjoy the support of the Council Chamber and the citizens of Kirklees and in the country if you take the courage of truth and justice and take actions necessary to help bring about an immediate ceasefire, a two-state solution, humanitarian aid that is very much needed to get in, and stopping arming of Israel. We stand with the Palestinian people, and just as we have stood with those from every corner of the world, of every race and of every creed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Councillor Joe Lawson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to speak in support of the Labour Group amendment to this resolution. I would like to put it on record that I condone any act of violence, any act of terrorism. I marched against the Iraq War. And also Israel has the right to defend itself. But this isn't defending themselves. This is genocide. This is, you look at innocent women, men and children being killed. It is genocide. It is ethnic cleansing that's going on. And then we see it on the news. Maybe you become a little bit sort of hardened. You see the statistics. When they report Israeli deaths, they were killed. When they report Palestinian deaths, they died. No, they didn't die. They were murdered. They were murdered in the name of the Netanyahu government that wants to clear Gaza of the Palestinians and will do the same in the West Bank. I went to a meeting on the 30th of December in Batley. There was a cardiologist that spoke there. He works at Mid Yorks Trust. He's from Gaza. He'd gone back to see family. He showed us pictures of his family home, the apartment building that he was in, the apartment building that him and his family barely got out alive. It brought the reality when you saw the pile of rubble that he'd just managed to survive to get out there. But what really made me nearly cry, tears coming down, his daughter, she'd been doing some voluntary work at school. She talked about one of her pupils. It was that mischievous little child that most teachers would have probably thought, oh God, not him again. But she had a bond with this child. He wanted to grow up and he wanted to be an engineer. He had a whole life in front of him. That child was murdered by this Israeli government. His crime was not because he was a member of Hamas, but because he was a Palestinian child. And I look at what's happening in Gaza, that is being funded by foreign governments, being funded by the American tax dollar, where there's been more bombs dropped on Gaza than there in the last 100 days than there was actually in the Blitz. And I would urge everybody just to reflect on what they've heard tonight, because we need a ceasefire, we need a two-state solution, but most of all, we need the Palestinians to be recognised as a country, because they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Councillor Mather.
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I felt I needed to be counted in this debate. What can I say? My heart is broken. And the silence is deafening. The double standards, the inconsistencies, the oldest democracies trying to teach us what's right when they know clearly it's bloody wrong, right? So, I do not want to quote statistics. And as Councillor Hussain just said, we see, we hear, and we know precisely what's right and what's wrong. So, Councillor Hall, strength of feeling is all I have, all we have. Because in democracies, we are given a voice without fear or favour to say what is right and what is wrong to power. And to tell them, not in my name, I believe in equality and social justice. We want what was promised in this conflict, this ongoing conflict and genocide. We want a two-state solution. We want an immediate and permanent ceasefire. And I say, not in my name, I did not agree to the use of very finite resources for public services to be used to buy bombs, supply ammunition, to kill innocent people. Two wrongs don't make a right. So, what can we say? We want Israel to stop. Enough is enough. And I urge both major parties, not just Conservatives, but Labour Party, to get out there and make it happen. Immediate ceasefire without any conditions, without provisos, without this, that, and the other. That's all I want to hear. That's all we want to hear. And anybody, and I also noted how many people spoke in this debate, how important it is to some at the exclusion of others. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. We'll now go to right of reply. Councillor Lee Richards, you have a right of reply if you wish. Thank you. Councillor Simpson, right of reply.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I will keep it short. I just want to commend my colleagues for the powerful and emotional contributions that we've heard this evening, and people across the chamber as well. And I'm really pleased because obviously this is such a heartbreaking, emotional issue. And as David said, there'll probably be 69 different, slightly different, unique perspectives on this, that a debate like this could have easily turned into something less pleasant than it has been. So I thank the Council for how everyone's conducted themselves. As a group, I think we've heard quite clearly from our group that we unequivocally condemn Hamas, a group whose founding charter states that it is dedicated to the abolition of the Jewish people and has said that it will continue to attack people, innocent civilians in Israel. The Houthis, whose very motto is death to America, death to Israel, a curse upon the Jews. Of course, we absolutely, utterly condemn those. But we've also heard from colleagues across the chamber tonight about how difficult it is to see the response from Israel since the attacks on the 7th of October as one that has been as targeted as it possibly could have been, when a majority of the people that have lost their lives are innocent civilians and women and children. And just in response to David, that matters to Kirklees because I think you've heard this evening how much pain that's causing for our councillors, and what they're doing is reflecting the pain that our residents are feeling as well. And it's not just about pain that people are feeling, that pain is also driving division in our communities, it's driving racism in our communities, whether that be anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. And we need to end the playing of politics on this issue, because it isn't acceptable when what we've heard tonight is all of us who basically agree that what we're seeing is horrific and we all want it to end. The fact that we have councillors in this chamber who feel unsafe and are having to have police visits throughout the last 3 months because of how this has played out. And also, David, you know, you made a comment that our amendment is about writing a letter. It isn't just about writing a letter as well. One of the resolutions is making clear that we restate our commitment to the votes that passed this council a couple of years ago around restating our commitment to the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and the All-Party Parliamentary Group on British Muslims' definition of Islamophobia, exactly for the reasons that I've just said. We cannot advocate, we must stand against the racism that's been driven through our communities and the division that we're seeing. And I hope this debate is a clear indication to our residents that we stand with them in the pain that we're feeling, and that we all hope that we can see peace as soon as is possible. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Marchington, you have a right of reply. Thank you. Councillor Cooper, right of reply.
So it's been quite emotional listening to some of the speeches that have been given here today, and they're obviously heartfelt. And when I heard Councillor Hall say at the beginning of this debate that this is something that we shouldn't be talking about, I think it definitely is, and it's given voice not just to the people in this council chamber, but to the people, to thousands of people in Kirklees. And perhaps if our parliamentarians had have stood up earlier on, our MPs, then perhaps there wouldn't be as much clamour as there is for a political institution like ourselves to say what needed to be said. I'll talk to the amendments. A lot of the things in the amendments I agreed with. Cannot support the Liberal Democrat amendment because it takes away us actually doing anything. It doesn't require us to do anything at all as a council, to express an opinion, to express a view to government. And so we will not be supporting that amendment from the Green Group. The Labour amendment, I was told that the Labour amendment would strengthen the Green amendment. And I thought maybe it would, because the Green motion, because you can always improve on a first draft. I had a look at it, and there's a few things I've noticed in it. Where the Green Party motion calls for an immediate permanent ceasefire, the Labour motion removes the words immediate permanent. Where the Green motion calls for a release of all hostages and also Palestinian prisoners in administrative detention, the Labour motion deletes Palestinian prisoners in administrative detention. Whereas the Green motion calls for an outright ban on arms sales to Israel, the Labour amendment calls for a review of UK arms sales and therefore weakens the motion. It also removes the call for Israel to resume negotiations with Palestinians. So having said that the Labour motion actually weakens the Labour amendment weakens the Green motion, we will be supporting it because we think it is important that this council sends a united, strong message to government about what we think here. We represent nearly 500,000 people in this council chamber, and we need to say that we believe in a ceasefire, that this council will do that and send the strongest message possible and represent the people out there who care so strongly about this, as I do, as you do. So please support our motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. We will now go to the vote on the Labour amendment. Councillor Butt will speak after the vote. Yeah. So we'll vote on the Labour amendment. It will be an electronic vote, please. So the green button is for, yellow abstain, red is against, or it's a plus or a minus. You're familiar with the console. If you could vote now, please. Labour amendment vote. Thank you. The vote is complete. You can see the results of the vote up there. Yes, 41. Abstentions, 15. Against, 1. That becomes a substantive motion. Councillor Butt.
Just in response to Councillor Cooper, in light of what Councillor Simpson said about playing politics and politicising this and toing and froing on this, I get that we have a motion, we get that we have amendments that go in, but substantively, I think we all agree on two things, that there should be a ceasefire, a lasting ceasefire, and a two-state solution. And I think that that's been echoed throughout all the comments and the speeches that have been made today. So I think just in that spirit, I think we should accept that the vote that's happened, and the fact that, you know, we generally agree on most of the things, and I think we shouldn't really be, you know, doing the semantics really about you know, minutiae really. I think we agree on the main points of that, and I'm quite happy with how we voted tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. We will now vote on the substantive motion electronically, which is the Labour amendment. Again.
Did I vote for?
Just hang on.
Did I? Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, that's for you to say.
Voting, are you voting?
Okay, we're going to close the vote because some people seem to be changing their minds. So we'll close the vote in 10 seconds. Make your mind up. No, thank you. To avoid any confusion, so that was the motion as amended by the Labour group. The Lib Dem motion fell at that point. Excuse me?
Wasn't. Yeah, correct. It wasn't put same.
Yes.
That's it. Over.
Thank you. So again, 42 in favour, abstentions. What was it? 15. And 1 against.
No, 42 abstentions.
Okay. Thank you. That concludes item 16. We will take a short break. Thank you all for your contributions, and we will return in at least 15 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back after a short break. So we now move to the motions. Item number 17, then 18 and then 19. These are the composite motions. So item number 17, motion under Council Procedure Rule 14 as to school uniform costs. Councillor Munro.
Mr Mayor, just before I propose this motion, I'd just like to say a few words. So school uniforms provide an opportunity for all pupils to be equal amongst their peers and can provide some children with confidence who may come from a poorer background than their peers. It simply cannot be right to sanction a pupil for a uniform breach that lies outside either their control or their parents' control. While I understand some pupils are working really hard to comply with current guidance, a small group of other schools, I understand, are not doing so. A cost of circa £400 for a secondary school uniform must be questioned. Is this sum actually affordable by all families per child? It's therefore vital that some parents find themselves having to shop around to get the best value for their money. Schools should respect this and support parents and families instead of stigmatising children and causing additional financial worries for families. Please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I second this and propose we move to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. We move to the vote. Show of hands, please. All those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That is carried. Yep.
Yep.
Item 18, motion under Council Procedure Rule 14 as to water quality and sewage discharge. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It won't come as a surprise to many that since the privatisation of the water companies, billions of pounds have been funneled away into profits rather than being invested in our water infrastructure. This has resulted in a grave situation for our rivers and waterways, and Kirklees is particularly affected by this. The River Calder being one of the most polluted in the whole of England. So this motion seeks to get the council to work collaboratively with the Canal Trust, with Yorkshire Water, with the government, and petition the government to be more ambitious in holding the water companies to account and getting better outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Is that seconded? Councillor Butt.
I second that and I propose that we go straight to the vote.
It's very kind, Councillor Butt. We go to the vote by show of hands. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? That is carried. Happy with that?
Yep.
Item 19, motion under Council Procedure Rule 14 as to NHS dental contract reform. Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you very much. I'd like to propose the motion as is written. It was a composite motion. It's an issue that has huge impacts on residents of Kirklees. It's totally wrong that there is either no access for some of our residents or very restricted access unless you can afford to pay.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey. Is that seconded? Councillor Davies.
Can I just say a few words as well? The current NHS contract, as we know, is not fit for purpose, and we've all heard the difficulties that people have had in accessing NHS care. driving to expensive private treatments, insurance schemes, travelling abroad for dodgy treatments abroad, and even, and this is the one that really gets me, is the DIY dental care, which is the one thing that we don't, you know, two words that shouldn't go together. DIY dental care, no thank you. Therefore, unless radical and urgent action is taken and the contract is significantly improved, NHS dentistry will not survive. We can all see that there's a problem. We need intervention from the government and the Department of Health. They need to grasp the challenges and attracting new and current dentists to undertake NHS work. Therefore, I second this motion and propose that we move to an immediate vote.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Can we please vote by a show of hands? All those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Motion is carried. Thank you. We will now go back to item 8, page 19, minutes of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. To receive for information the minutes of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. The minutes are here for noting. Are there any comments or questions regarding the minutes? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm just going to refer to page 16 of our papers. And at the top it says Combined Authority Brand Review. And I wondered whether Councillor Scott could tell us how much this brand review has cost, please.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I don't have that figure to hand, but I'm happy to bring that back to the Chamber because I think there should be a discussion around what we're actually doing at the Combined Authority to make it more informative for all members, because at the end of the day, it's a cross-party thing, so I think it's something that I will be bringing back. So I'm not filibustering, it's just I think it's something that should come back to the Chamber, but I will get that figure circulated round.
Councillor Hall, any?
Yeah, can I thank Councillor Scott for that answer? I'd be pleased to know that. And thank you for what she's just said, because I think sometimes we pass the minutes through without much of an inspection or a scrutiny to it. And actually, when you look at how much money both this council and the government are giving to the Combined Authority, I know it has its own scrutiny, but I think sometimes we could do to delve a little bit deeper from this chamber into how much we're paying them and what we're getting back from it. So I do welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Any other questions? Okay, that's fine. So we'll move on to item 9. Half-yearly monitoring report on Treasury management activities 2022-23, reference from Cabinet. Councillor Turner.
We have adopted the ceasefire Code of Conduct and Practice, so we are required under that code to report regularly to members. Today's report covers the period from 1st of April 2022 until the 30th of September 23. We continue to use Arlington Close as our Treasury Management Advisors. This report was approved at the last Corporate Governance Audit Committee back in November, and at this Friday's meeting of the Corporate Governance and the Audit Committee of the Investment Strategy for 2024-25 will be discussed. Mr Mayor, I move that Council notes this report.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor Scott. Are there any comments on this matter? Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. There's obviously a lot of work gone into the report and into its simplification, for which I am very grateful. These things can be impenetrable enough at the best of times, and we appreciate the inclusion of Arlington Close's economic update. That's very valuable too. From it, we get a feel of just how difficult it is right now to manage investments and how hard it is to judge interest rates and deal with an apparent emerging stagflation with some market volatility. The markets we're interested in, for example, chucked in for good measure. Now, if we look up from that part of the document, though, what is clear on the national scene is that having blamed the world's events for inflation over the last year, it's not credible that the Conservative government can claim success in the modest reductions we've seen recently, no matter how hard Mr Sunak tries. In the performance section, it's reassuring to read that the prudential investment is currently the watchword, and that at a time of uncertainty, liquidity is the underlying goal. At paragraph 2.15, though, there's something that caught my attention, and that's the expectation, and these are the words, the expectation that Kirklees will be a long-term borrower according to the new liability benchmark. Now, there's nothing wrong there. All councils borrow something over the long term, of course. Surely we all know that. Now, looking at Appendix 4, which covers the benchmark, we seem to be given an either-or scenario. You're either a borrower or an investor. Now, that shapes the investment of the strategy that we take. That's said in that paragraph. In our case, though, because of our borrowing that we've chosen to do or are about to do, we seem to be restricting ourselves to investing for day-to-day fluidity, which is fine for now. I think my comment or the question that falls out of that is that I think, have we locked ourselves into an investment trap by the current plans from the Labour administration? And has the Cabinet handcuffed future administrations' ability to take advantage of better market conditions? I think those questions go to the core of the future of this council, and that there needs to be some ownership in these public documents when these are produced of the decisions that have been made that lead up to these kinds of scenarios. And I guess what I'm asking is, are we reassured that we are nimble enough and flexible enough to take advantage of the occurrence of when things come right, when markets come right for us? Are we going to be able to take advantage of that? Because don't forget, by the time that that happens, we will be a much reduced council. And that needs bearing in mind. I think the only other point I'd make about this is that when we talk about debt and council debt, it's interesting to note that, that in a list of totals of amassed debts, Kirklees is 54th out of 382, with roughly £1,200 plus per head, probably more in updated figures. Now, while we're not Medway or Birmingham, who are at the very top of those lists, I would be interested in seeing what happens to that figure in future and maybe having it included in this report, just so we can get some kind of an added benchmark, if you like, about what's happening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Right of reply, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just make a couple of points. And John referred to the drop in inflation, which is, as we all know, that taking interest in these things wasn't the work of the government. It was international policies played out. It was interesting for those of us who were boring enough to watch PMQs today failed to take any responsibility for the rise in inflation to 4% when challenged on that. Going back to borrowing, this is a very short report, John, and if you want to take time, and it is a time, to go through the corporate and governance audit papers for Friday, there is reference to borrowing and explaining how we can move that around in future. And it's not in here, but it is in that report for Friday, which we'll discuss the corporate governance body. So we can move, we have got that facility to move things around as and when rates change or we get a better deal. So it is in that report for Friday. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Yeah, this report is for noting. Show of hands. It says it on it. Thank you. You could choose not to note it, but there we go. Okay, item 10. Appointment of chair. Council is asked to nominate a chair of the district-wide planning committee, which will take effect from the 9th of February 2024. Councillor Sokal.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the Councillor Sheikhullah be appointed as chair of the district-wide planning committee for the remaining of the municipal year, with effect from 9th February. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sokal. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Hall.
I would like to propose an alternative candidate, my good friend and very capable councillor, Donald Bellamy.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Is that seconded?
I second that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
recorded vote?
We need 5 to ask for it.
5? Yeah, 5 people need to rise, please. Or 10. Thank you very, that's fine, thank you. It's over-eager, there's too many of you now. Okay, we will have a recorded vote. So as it is a contest, members, if you just want to listen to what we're going to do, and then you'll know how to respond. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Your name will be... Sorry, you interrupted me, Councillor Cooper. That's what I'm saying. Just be quiet, thank you. Your name will be called out in order. You respond with the name of the candidate that you wish to vote for or abstain. Everybody okay with that? Those with the most votes will win.
Okay, so I have the delight of reading out the names. So please, can you listen carefully? They'll come more or less in the order that they've come in previously, but I'll start with group leaders. So, Councillor Scott.
Councillor Ola.
Thank you. Councillor David Hall. Okay. Councillor John Lawson.
Abstain.
Okay. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Addy. Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Amin. Councillor Anwar. He's not here. Councillor Armour. Councillor Bamford. Councillor Bellamy. So I don't think we have Councillor Bolt here. So Councillor Burke. You're abstaining, okay. Councillor Butt. Councillor Crook. Councillor Dadd. Councillor Paula Davies. Councillor Paul Davies. Councillor Dockrat. Not here, okay. Councillor Eric Firth. Thank you. Councillor Greaves. Councillor Steve Hall. Councillor Hawkins.
What was that?
Shake all. Councillor Holmes. Councillor Homewood. Councillor Hussain. Councillor Kaushik. Councillor Kendrick. Thank you. Councillor Khan, I don't think she's in the room, is she? No, okay. Councillor Joe Lawson.
The very capable Councillor Shakeover.
I thought you were going to say Bellamy.
Councillor Lee Richards. Okay. Councillor Lees Hamilton's not here. Councillor Lowe.
Councillor Shakeover.
Councillor Marchington.
Abstain.
Councillor Mather. Not here. She's gone. Councillor McCarthy.
Councillor Ola.
Councillor McGrath.
Councillor Bellamy.
Okay. Councillor McGuinn.
Councillor Bellamy.
Councillor McKirker. Councillor McLaughlin.
Very proud to vote Councillor Ola.
Councillor Moore.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Councillor Munro.
Abstain.
Councillor Pandor. Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Shakeover.
Councillor Perez.
Councillor Liv.
Councillor Amanda Pinnock.
Councillor
Councillor Andrew Pinnock.
Abstain.
Councillor Kath Pinnock. Abstain, that's an abstention. Okay. Councillor Ramsey.
Councillor Fuller.
Okay. Councillor Saftar.
Councillor Ola.
Councillor Sheard.
Councillor
you. Councillor Simpson.
With regret,
Councillor. Okay, Councillor Smage. Okay, Councillor Anthony Smith. Okay, Councillor Richard Smith. Okay, Councillor Sokol. Okay, Mel's not here. No, there is Councillor Thompson. Councillor Turner.
Let me think about it. Councillor Uller.
Sorry, Councillor Uller.
Yeah, I'm so proud to have colleagues like this. Myself, Councillor Sheikh Uller.
Okay, and finally, Councillor Habiban Zaman. Thank you. I've already asked them. Yes, he abstained.
He's done this.
Thank you. 33 for Councillor Uller, 11 for Councillor Bellamy and 9 abstentions. Right of reply, Councillor Sokol. Oh, wait, does he? Thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you. Congratulations, Councillor Uller. Item 11. Written questions to the Leader, Cabinet Members, Chairs of Committees and nominated spokespersons. A written list of submitted questions has been circulated. I will now invite members to ask their questions in turn. The appropriate member will then respond. One supplementary question to each submitted question is permitted. Councillor Greaves.
Thank you. What was the budget for school transport in 2018? What was it in 2020? And what was it in 2023? And how many years since 2018 has the budget been overspent by at least £500,000?
Thank you. You'll receive a written response. Councillor Greaves, second question.
Yeah. For Education Transport 16 Plus, for the 300 people supported in this scheme, how many travel by individual taxi and how many travel by specialist adapted vehicles? And of those who used shared transport, how many are in taxis, minibuses and buses? And how much of the current budget is likely to be saved if the proposals under consultation are approved?
Thank you, Councillor Greaves. Again, as Councillor Reynolds is not here, you'll receive a written response. Reynolds. Question 3, Councillor Greaves.
So for school transport under 16, how many children are transported each school day and how many travel by individual taxi? How many travel by specialist adapted vehicles and how many who travel in shared transport are in taxis or minibuses or buses? And how much is the current budget and how much could be saved by moving towards a shared transport policy?
Thank you, Councillor Greaves. Again, you'll receive a written response. Question 4, Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for Councillor Butt, I believe it is now, relatively new to the job. This council has recently purchased a fleet of new household refuse collection vehicles. In an apparently unforeseen development, the new vehicles are larger than the old ones and cannot access old properties. As a consequence, a number of households around my ward of Kirkburton no longer receive an adequate bin collection service. Frequently, they have not had prior notification of any changes, and issues have only come to attention when collections have not been made. What steps is the Cabinet Member taking to ensure that these vital services, and there is indeed a typo, to be vital services of refuse collection, are delivered to all of my residents? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armour. Councillor Butt.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Armour. The Council have a fleet of over 90 refuse collection vehicles. The fleet is inclusive of several different sized vehicles, the majority of which are 32 or 26-tonne vehicles. We also operate a smaller number of vehicles for hard-to-reach locations. Our recent vehicle replacement programme included 18 new refuse collection vehicles to replace those at the end of economic life. Vehicle procurement is carefully considered, including dialogue with the supply chain and availability. The vehicles recently brought into our fleet are marginally larger in width than the outgoing vehicles, which has indeed resulted in a small number of access issues. To ensure a consistent service for residents in difficult-to-access locations who have been affected, the service has been working to rebalance the workload of our special access vehicle to create capacity, which should be completed before the end of the month. I will continue to monitor the performance of the service on a regular basis, especially locations or areas that have limited access.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Supplementary, Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does the Cabinet member consider that this matter has been handled appropriately, especially given that this Council is committed to acting transparently and to consulting with our residents, and it's been a silent failure. The crews have just driven on when they couldn't get the vehicle in. Is that appropriate?
Councillor Butt.
Thanks for the supplementary. I think it is appropriate. The reason being is that it's done through the proper channels. It's gone through procurement, and it was a requirement that we replace an aging fleet, which also means that we get newer technology engines and they are more efficient. And of course, we have a climate emergency that we have said, and therefore to be able to address that, we need to have the appropriate vehicles at the right time to be able to address a need and to be able to do the statutory work that they're there for. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Question 5, Councillor Armour.
Thank you. That hardly answered my question, but we'll move on. What was the cost of these new household refuse collection vehicles?
Councillor Butt.
Thank you. The procurement was part of the vehicle replacement programme approved at Cabinet on the 14th of December 2021. This replaced 48 vehicles at an expenditure of 6.25 million, which included a number of refuse collection vehicles.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Supplementary, Councillor Armour.
Yes, thanks. That didn't seem to answer the question, which was specifically about household refuse collection. However, I'll take it there's no answer to that. As a supplementary, given that this council faces severe financial pressures and that I am now informed the new vehicles cannot access all the properties in my ward, does the Cabinet member consider this to have been an efficient and effective use of scarce financial resources?
Councillor Butt.
Thank you for the supplementary. It does cost a lot of money to service older vehicles, and therefore I think it's a good way of investing in that. We sometimes have to invest money to be able to save money in the longer term, and I believe that this was the right way to do that. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Question 6, Councillor Armour.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Simple one. Was the cleansing service consulted about requirements such as physical dimensions for the new household refuse collection vehicles before contracts were signed?
Councillor Butt.
When we procure new vehicles, we work with services and suppliers to understand what is required and what is available, running open competitive tenders. All suppliers who bid had vehicles that were almost exact same dimensions for each type of vehicle required.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Supplementary, Councillor Armour.
Yes, thank you. That's an interesting response. They're almost exactly the same size, but they weren't, Mr. Mayor. And they don't fit where the other vehicles used to. So I'm afraid that's not a very clear answer. Thank you.
Was that a question, though? That wasn't a clear question, should I say?
Okay, in that case, would the Cabinet member like to explain the difference between exactly the same size, a bit bigger, but doesn't fit?
Councillor Butt.
I will refer back to the answer that I gave to question 4. To ensure a consistent service for residents in difficult-to-access locations who have been affected, the service has been working to rebalance the workload of our special access vehicle to create capacity, which should be completed before the end of the month. I hope that satisfies them.
Thank you very much, Councillor Butt. Item 12, page 55, the minutes of the meetings of Cabinet are here for information to note. Item 13, holding the Executive to account. For Part A of this item, Council received a portfolio update from the portfolio holder for Children's Services, Councillor Kendrick. Oral questions, comments to Cabinet members on their portfolios and on Cabinet minutes will be at Part B. So for Part A, the Cabinet member update from Councillor Kendrick, which will take 10 minutes. Then we'll take 10 minutes of questions to Councillor Kendrick, and then we will have less than 40 minutes for Part B for oral questions to Cabinet members on their portfolios on Cabinet minutes. Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm told that technology will put up... Oh, it's behind... Oh, there it is. I've even been given some technology to mess up this, but there we are. I'm working on the premise that most of you in this chamber can actually read, so I'm not going to read out everything on every sheet as such. But, Mr. Mayor, you will remember, as a long-standing member of council, that I have had on many occasions had cause to say that all of us are corporate parents. And for those of you that are new members, since I last said that, I need to tell you, you are corporate parents too. However, when I reflect on saying that, it's probably a bit unfair, because I don't think that a lot of colleagues recognise what that means for them. Those who are on corporate parenting board or children's scrutiny panel have a connection, but perhaps not as much for other councillors. And I suppose what I want to say to you is we need to harness your knowledge, your connections, to get the best outcomes for our children and young people. What connections have you got with workplaces that could get work experience, training, or even jobs? Who do you know who might want to be an independent visitor for one of our looked-after young people? Who can help with fundraising for special events? And what decisions are you making, and how might those affect care leavers? And we're looking to develop a brand that would help you promote perhaps our care leavers' needs and desires to local businesses and contacts. So here goes the technology, second slide. Oh no, I'm not going to change it yet. I don't know how many of you are parents or how many children you've got. Perhaps you've got dependent children or grown-up children or no children. But whatever the answer is, I do have some news for you. All right? You actually have, whatever you've got, say 2 children, you actually have 1,002 children. For you, Councillor Butt, that's 1,004, but there we are. The numbers are approximate because they do change almost daily. A child may be adopted, may return home to their family, may become 18 and move into the care leaver bit, and so on. But basically, you know, these are your children, my children, all of us in this chamber. In recent years, we've been working to improve our approach to corporate parenting, looking at our offer and our support for care leavers. And we've continued to look at how we can improve corporate parenting in Kirklees. One of the ways is to develop the corporate parenting board by including decision makers from other services and organisations, such as adult services, housing, health, and so on. But there's still an awful lot to do on that. So, here we go again, keep reading. There's a national drive to improve outcomes for children who are looked after and care leavers. And the current scene that we have is set by the Children's and Social Work Act 2017. But it should be noted, and it says it up there as well, that it's likely to become, our principles for corporate parenting are likely to become duties, responsibilities, actions set in regulation. Please note the last bullet point. Again, this is a mantra I need you all to learn. Would this be good enough for my child? Because these are your children. In search of outside views, we had Mark Riddell, MBE, come for 2 days to look at our services. And we also currently have a sort of peer review from North Yorkshire looking at our services, and there is an ongoing process till March. Mark Riddell gave us quite a lot of recommendations, but there were 2 key recommendations that I want to mention today. One was about developing our family firm, and another was reviewing and resetting our governance arrangements, bringing corporate parenting to life is the phrase. The technology working. So here we are. This is what's perhaps meant by a family firm. The family firm are those organisations under the umbrella. I do think housing should be in there, and possibly local businesses too. But as you can see, we are the biggest employer, the biggest landlord, the most diverse. And I have to point out to you, we are the richest parent in Kirklees. Unless you know differently, you've got more money than I thought. So, you know, bearing those things in mind is really important. So what we're doing, here's a list of what we're doing. I'll let you read that. And they're all about improving our corporate parenting. And some more of what we're doing. So there are more actions and steps there, but please note the second bullet point, because I intend to bring a motion to the next meeting of this council to asking this council to recognise being care experience as a protective characteristic, to do the best thing for our young people. You know, and you have to think about it in terms of which of you, those of you who have children, older children, when they were 18, you might have waved them off to university, but I bet you didn't say, out of the door and never return, you're on your own, get on with it, folks. You know, and if they're like my children, they keep coming back with the problems, even if I only give them advice and not cash. So I hope everybody will feel able to support that motion to council when it comes. And the last bullet point is very key. The corporate parenting is everybody's business. Is it good enough for my child? But we intend, as you'll see in the last bullet point, to offer training and awareness raising across the council, both the councils and officers, to help understand and think about how we can directly contribute and make corporate parenting everybody's business. I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Are there any questions for Councillor Kendrick? Councillor Richard Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not really a question as such, but I'd just like to say that I'm very supportive of what we've just heard, and I think that very often in this chamber we do disagree about things on policies, and actually this is one of the things where probably we don't have much disagreement at all. I think it's really important, you mentioned there's 600 under 18s and then 18s to 25s is 400, there's about 1,000 in total. And I think I've been a member of the Corporate Parenting Board and Children's Scrutiny Panel for quite some years now, and it's actually one of the things I enjoy most of being an elected member. And I think it brings it home to me personally, the responsibility of being a corporate parent. And I think that's something that perhaps if I wasn't a member of those two committees,
or boards that I possibly wouldn't know. So that's the plea really, and I'm sort of supporting what Councillor Kendrick has said about this. I'm a father myself, and many of us in this room are, and when we look at our own children, we obviously want to do the best for them. And what we're talking about are kids that don't have that in their corner, they don't have that support. And so it's really important that collectively, there's 69 councillors representing a large population of 440,000 people, of which quite a sizable part are people under 25, and we just mentioned the 1,000 that are without that family support. So what we really do need to do collectively is understand that responsibility as a corporate parent. And a good example, I went to the youth offending team about 4 years ago, and I was speaking to a chap there who explained about, he mentioned a scenario to me about a child in a children's home who had, I think he'd broken a window, and the police were called, and it always sticks in my mind that this child was then arrested and put through the, whatever its correct terminology is, effectively the youth offending system. And I don't necessarily fully know what happened to that child, but clearly at some point he was locked up and charged, and probably before a magistrate, and possibly now that has not resulted in a record on it. But the point about this is that if that was my own child that smashed my window, I wouldn't be calling the police. I might not be very happy with him, and I might potentially fall out with him for 24 hours, but I wouldn't be calling the police, and I would pay for the window to be fixed. So that's the point. And we're all corporate parents, and these kids do need somebody in their corner. And you know, we all have a responsibility to be that corporate parent. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Kath Pinnock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask Councillor Kendrick about private children's homes, care homes? You know about them in your ward when a planning application comes in. So I think we have 3 currently in our ward, plus a larger one run by a housing association. And it does strike me that we as ward members have no idea about, have information about the quality of care, how we can support as corporate parents those children in our wards, but in private care homes. So it would be helpful to me, and maybe others, to understand how the council can support ward members in their role as corporate parents in relation to private care homes. And then a similar but unrelated point is this, that for young people who have been in care, leaving at 16 sometimes, going into totally inappropriate care placements run by private companies, where there is little care, but plenty of money changing hands to the benefit of the provider. Again, it does seem to me, as we have a duty of care to the age of 25, as you've reminded us, that there ought to be more information shared with ward members so we can have some understanding of the difficulties some of our young people face in both those scenarios, and how we as ward members can be supportive of the directorate in helping those young people.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Councillor Kendrick.
Councillor Pinnock for that. I'm not quite sure I've understood the difference between your 2 examples. You talked about private care homes in your ward, and then what was the difference in the second lot of private care homes?
Yes, Councillor Pinnock.
To the national scandal that has been publicised about some care providers
All right, I'm with you.
for young people who are put into larger care homes when they're 16 plus and out of their home surroundings.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's quite a difficult issue, really, because I understand, I don't know if it always happens, as an authority we are informed when young people come into the area, into a private care home from elsewhere. I would expect all the young people in the care homes in your ward are not from Kirklees. They will be from afar. And these care homes are inspected just like our residential care homes are by the authorities. Where we think there is an issue, and I have come across it in the past, where we think there is something physically, for instance, the matter with a home, we have the right to go in and have a look. And where we have concerns about a care home, I do know that we would inform that the authorities from where those young people have come. But as for having information about those young people, I don't have it. I don't think it's appropriate either. But I understand your concerns. I mean, I've got 3 in our ward within 4 streets of each other, you know. There shouldn't be any large ones, though. My understanding is 6 beds is the biggest that they can be. I may be wrong in that. All right, well, I'll wait for the Director of Children's Services to correct me and educate me on that, because my understanding is it's 6 is a maximum as such. I am right, am I? Yeah, so 10 is not
We just
not regulated, but anyway.
Councillor Pinnock, do you have a supplementary?
The director do know about it. It's for older children, and it has 10 beds, I think. So the issue then becomes very complicated because we are corporate parents. Children are placed in our wards, may come from Leeds, Manchester, Bradford, anywhere, all over the country. So these young people are not our responsibility, but live in our ward. And I don't know what other people do, but I feel if there is an issue, I feel I have a responsibility to those wherever they live, wherever they come from. So for me, this is at the heart of some of the issues about children in care, is that they, sometimes for the right reason, are placed away from their families, but sometimes they should be placed nearer their families where we can appropriately behave as corporate parents.
I absolutely agree with you. For me, personally, I find the idea of these parachuted in young people abhorrent, and it really does come down to a lot of what it costs to buy a property here as opposed to Surrey or London or Manchester, and I would love to see that whole idea being banned.
Thank you very much. There are 4 speakers. We're clearing the list. We're moving on to Part B. Oral questions, comments to Cabinet members on their portfolios and on Cabinet minutes. So there's an opportunity for those who didn't get the question there to come back again. We'll take the names as proportionately as we can, and we've got half an hour. So oral questions, comments to Cabinet members on their portfolios, on Cabinet minutes. Are there any questions, comments to the Leader of the Council or Cabinet members? Councillor Holmes.
Not on. Oh, yes. Councillor Turner, probably won't be surprised what I'm going to ask. The Red House Yorkshire Heritage Trust are intending to bid for Red House. They submitted their written bid on the 2nd of January, and they have a deadline of the 20th of May to complete negotiations, raise the money, do everything else that's involved. Given they had withdrawn their CAT plans because of the council business plan for the Airbnb, they would very much appreciate, as would ward members, an extension to the time allowed for them to complete this bid to try and keep Red House in community ownership. And they would very much appreciate that being extended to the end of this year. Is that possible, please?
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Turner.
If they're applied under the CAT, then there is a timescale for that process to go through. So we'll work to that timescale.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Supplementary, Councillor Holmes.
It's not particularly a CAT they're looking at now, though, is that? It's a purchase bid. Am I misunderstanding this? Can they still do a CAT for no cost?
I don't know. I will have to check with the corporate landlord. I don't have a briefing with the head of corporate landlord. He's off ill, so I need to put something extra in place, and that will be one of the things we were discussing. So I'll get back to you later on towards the end of the month, hopefully.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Andrew Cooper.
It's a question to Councillor Crook. About 18 months ago, I put a request in for a tractor sign on Park Lane. Farm traffic there frequently gets peeped at by impatient cars going up the road while the farmer's going about his legitimate business. And 18 months ago, Highways agreed to put tractor signs on Park Lane at Berry Brown. They're still not fitted. Could you please chase up with Highways when those tractor signs are going to be fitted? I have chased them up myself, but to no avail. So hopefully your new powers will enable you to sort this problem out for me, and I would be very grateful. Thank you very much.
Councillor Crook.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cooper, for your question. I will certainly chase that up for you and get back to you in due course.
Councillor Cooper, supplementary. Excellent. Best contribution all evening from you. Who's next? Councillor David Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question about the Greenway. So I'm guessing it will go to Councillor Crook again, probably, but somebody will answer it, I'm sure. The Spen Valley, the greenways that run through the Spen Valley are now becoming very dirty because the people from Sustrans that used to clean the greenway are no longer doing it. And we've got litter bins there that are overflowing, and it's not regularly swept. And it is becoming unpleasant in places. And I wonder whether you could use your influence, please, to have a word with Sustrans to see whether they could reinstigate this particular service, because it's a very, very valued resource, is the Greenway, and I don't want people to be put off using it because it's not pleasant. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Crook.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hall, for your question. I'm quite new in post, but I do remember very much at the beginning of my post that I did see an email responding to a very similar question about the staffing of the Greenway and the Sustrans involvement in that. I will chase that up and get back to you with an email response because I wouldn't want to answer it and get the details wrong, but I don't have any influence with Sustrans that I'm aware of. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Hall, supplementary. No. Councillor Anthony Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry, but with some of the comings and goings lately in Cabinet, I'm not sure who to direct this to, but it's kind of in respect, well, it is in respect of the proposed increases to permit parking charges. You'll have no doubt, those of you that were still awake will have noticed that a petition was submitted by a resident of Lindley on behalf of the residents of Lindley. I know this is an issue in many of our wards, but it's a particular issue in Lindley, where we have the Huddersfield Royal Infirmary and many terrace properties around our busy high streets. And what residents are faced with, let's say an average resident who has one car, who he may keep for 3 years. At the moment, they would pay a £15 fee for the production and administration of a parking permit to park on his own street, near his own house. What he's now faced with is a charge of £50 per year for that vehicle. That's the proposal, I believe, which effectively amounts to, over a 3-year period, a tenfold increase. Many of these people are on fixed incomes, many of these people on low incomes. We have pensioners. And given the cost of living crisis that our residents face, how can these sorts of increases for people who want to park on their own street be justified? Thank you.
Councillor Butt.
Thank you for your question. Yes, that is the proposal, that the cost will go to £50. £50 is actually less than what a lot of other authorities will charge. And rather than having the incremental charges, which probably should have come in, it has gone up to what it is. Yes, there is a cost of living crisis. I absolutely understand and I empathise with everybody that is going to find it might find it difficult to do that. But we also have a cost of funding crisis here in Kirklees as well. So that's all I will say on that, to say that yes, it is £50, will be a lot for some, but the charge is actually lower than what other authorities will charge as well.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Councillor Smith, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I appreciate the financial pressures that the council's under. I don't think that this is going to do anything, but this represents anything more than much of a rounding figure in the council's overall budget, but it'll have a significant impact on residents. Will the cabinet member commit to listening to residents' views, and if not scrapping the charges entirely, look at ways that they can be managed to those who can least afford to pay these charges?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Butt.
Whilst in a democracy we are always happy to listen, you know, we have committed to this, and that is the answer to that.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This is a question for Councillor Ramsey regarding care homes. A resident of mine in Meltham has wanted me to publicise that there's a public meeting at Murfield Community Centre at 6:30 this Monday regarding the closures of the 2 dementia care homes that are currently under review. So the question would be, will you or any other of the councillors from the council be attending? And also, have you had chance to review the independent report that was sent over by the group named Save Our Kirklees Dementia Care Homes? Thank you.
Thanks very much for your question. Thank you. We are aware of the public meeting. It does clash with another meeting, and there isn't much to say at the moment because we're working through the detail of the consultation responses that we've had. With regards to the independent report, that too is going through the consultation process.
Councillor McGrath, supplementary.
Thank you very much for the response. And just a follow-up question of when would that group be looking at getting a response? Would it be at the end of the full consultation, or do you think they could have a response earlier just based on their one independent report?
My understanding is it will be at the end of the full consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Richard Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As Cabinet Member for Housing and Highways, can you outline the strategy, and is there a plan for dealing with the appalling state of the roads riddled with potholes across our region?
Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, for your question. We do everything that we can to maintain the quality of our highways, and we take the quality of our highways very seriously. There is a constant process of review of the state of our highways, and within that, depending on the type of road, there are inspections on 1, 3, 6 or 12 monthly cycles. We very much welcome the input from members of the public as well within that to help us to identify areas where there are additional potholes that have occurred in between inspections and require repair. But within that, we also understand that there is a financial situation within the council that is limiting budgets, and that will limit the budgets available for highway repairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Supplementary, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the response. Can I ask that you look at an email I received from a resident in Kirkburton regarding potholes, the largest of which has been measured at 1600 millimetres by 500 with a depth of 50 millimetres, and this is on a main road in Stores Hall Lane. So clearly there is an issue that needs to be looked at. So can I send you that email to have a look at?
Absolutely. Please do send me that email and I will absolutely send that on to Highways officers for attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. Probably for Councillor Turner, this one. Are there any plans to claw back unspent ward funds at the beginning of the new financial year? Or, to put it another way, will there be any rollover?
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson, for that question. As yet, we haven't finalised next year's budget.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Supplementary, Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, will you be looking at any possible savings that might be available to be made through delegation of spending to local ward members? What we'll find is in communities, I'm sure if we talk to them enough and in enough detail, we will find opportunities through prioritisation about what they would like to spend money on and what they think they might be able to wait or can do without.
Thank you for that. With the gross underfunding of local government caused by the current administration, we've had for the last 40 years, we'll be looking at absolutely everything to what we can save money to get to our balanced budget position in March.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bellamy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is for Councillor Crooks. Can you tell me the policy on keeping pets in council-owned homes, in particular dogs?
Councillor Crook.
I can't tell you exactly what the policy is for keeping pets in council-owned homes. I had a recent question regarding the XL bully dog species, but I will get back to you by email and give you the full chapter and verse on pet keeping in council homes. Thank you.
Yeah, supplementary, Councillor Bellamy.
Yes, please. Apparently the policy's changed and it's now written into tenancy agreements. However, for those tenants that have been in houses for a long time, it isn't written in. So that was my supplementary was actually going to go towards the XL bully thing, because now we've got residents contacting us asking if they are basically going to be evicted, even though they have followed up with their with their registration of XL bullies, etc. Because it doesn't actually say anywhere on the Kirklees website, whereas Leeds and others have actually produced a statement saying, they wouldn't. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bellamy. I absolutely understand that for some people an attachment to a pet is a very important part of their lives, and I'm sure that the housing policy will be very sensitive towards that. We also will be obviously following any legislation that comes from government with respect to dangerous breeds. And as I say, I will get back to you with full chapter and verse on that policy in due course. I also take note of your point about there not being a published policy on the website. I'm not sure if that's right or not. It might be buried somewhere in the detail, but I will look out and make sure that that is published in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Smage.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Crook. Potholes. I realise, as I understand it, this council has a backlog in repairs of potholes, and the 7-day and the 28-day is not being kept, response is not being kept to. Do you think it is efficient and cost-effective working to come to one pothole here on one day, one pothole here the following week, and one pothole here 3 weeks later, and none of the potholes here from December? Do you think this is efficient and cost-effective to the council? Thank you.
Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. I certainly don't think it would be efficient or cost-effective to flit about the whole of Kirklees doing individual potholes. We have, as I've said before, a programme of inspection of highways, depending on the highway, the time frame changes, and then we incorporate repairs as required into a rolling programme of repairs. Obviously, if there is notification from a member of the public about a pothole, we would hope that that would be inspected within the time frames within the very excellent Highway Service Guide. I recommend everyone reads it. And if we fail to meet the standards on some occasions, I can only apologise for that. We'd have to take that on a case-by-case basis. But as I say, we will try and incorporate any reported potholes into that rolling repair process to ensure that we have the maximum efficiency and benefit.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Supplementary.
Just a quick supplementary. If you could look at how the service could work efficiently, I'm sure our residents would much appreciate it, so that potholes can get repaired in a reasonable time frame and not get so big that it then costs the council far more to fill the pothole and far more in compensation when cars are damaged. Thank you.
I mean, I take your point about repairing highways and keeping them in good state of repair. We absolutely wish to do that. If we had sufficient funding from central government, we would have a better highways repair policy. It's a fact of life. The highways service is absolutely on their budget.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor David Hall.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is to do with permit parking again, so I'm sorry it comes back to you, Councillor Cook, but you're in the hot seat today. Has been what said to Councillor Smith earlier. We're told that these charges for permit parking are going to rise to £50. We've also been told that this covers the cost of the administration of the stuff. Now, is it really the case that in order to process an application for permit parking, it costs us £50? That seems like an awful lot of money to me. I'm not sure of what the process involves in this, but presumably it's checking simply that the person is resident at the place where they say, and if they are, you send them a permit that they've applied for, because I don't think there's any other categories to weed out the people that are doing. So that seems to me to be quite an easy process. And then you've got the cost of printing a permit, well, that can't be more than pence, and then posting it to the resident, which again, probably £1. So try as I might, I can't figure out how that process is going to cost £50. So can you confirm that that's actually the cost of processing is £50, please?
Thank you. Councillor Butt.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
It's all right. You asked one councillor, you get another free. I absolutely acknowledge the question about the cost, although I will go off and ask what the procedure is and what the main cost is. What I can say today is that it's actually the road traffic order that has to be done that makes the bulk of that cost. But like I mentioned, I will get that answer for you in terms of where the costings come from on there, if that's okay. Well, I'm only in my second week, so go easy, yeah?
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor Hall.
Oh, sorry. Push the button. Am I on yet, Mr Mayor? Oh, yes. Beg your pardon. Put my specs on. Yeah, I apologise. It should have been to Councillor Butt there. Yes, of course, you're new to the post, and you've got to recognise that. Coming back to this £50, presumably the cost of an RTO, though, applies to the new permit zones and not to existing ones, because they're just being rolled over. So I think we can discount that in most cases. And if it indeed does cost £50 over, do you think it would be better, instead of increasing the fees, to actually look at reducing the cost of administering the service?
Councillor Butt.
I note your comments, and like I mentioned, I will speak to the officers that are dealing with this to try and get a response as to how it works and the costings. And that's all I can say at the moment. If that's sufficient, I will get back to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. That's very kind. Councillor Greaves. We've got one question, so we have got a motion. We may get to the motion depending on the length of your question.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, did you say one question? Oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was waiting for you. Question to Councillor Butt. It's in respect of the consultation for car parking charges. If we look at page 57 of our papers today and the Cabinet meeting minutes from the 14th of November, under item 84, paragraph 7, it says that the report advised that a statutory consultation would be undertaken as part of the legal process required to implement the revised charges, and that following the consultation, a report would be presented to Cabinet Committee local issues for consideration prior to the implementation of the new fees. Now, that's what the minutes say, and that was my understanding of it, but what we've been told is actually that there will be no consultation on the increase on those fees where they're already in place. The consultation will only take place where new fees are being introduced. Could you clarify whether or not the minutes are correct or whether the officer understanding is correct?
Councillor Butt.
I note your question, Councillor Greaves. I will check on that so that I can give you a proper answer and the correct answer, and I can get back to you on that if that's okay.
Supplementary.
The previous Cabinet member referred to the changes in the bin collection arrangements as teething problems. Some of my residents have been without regular collections for over 3 months.
Councillor Greaves, it's a separate question. It's not supplementary. I'm going to have to move on. Thank you. To sit down. Are there any other questions? If not, we will move to... Interrupting me. We will move to the motion, item 15. I know we've got 14 first. Thank you very much. I'm well aware of that. If I needed assistance, I will ask. Are there any other questions under item 14? I just said. Councillor Greaves again. Thank you.
A question for Councillor Kendrick, and it's regarding children's social care placements. There's an article in First magazine that indicates just how much some placements are costing. Across England and Wales, the highest cost placement is £63,000 a week for a child in a children's home. It says the vast majority of authorities are paying up to 10 grand a week for one child. And I imagine that for those particular children, there's a lot of demands, a lot of pressures, which accounts for the cost. But within the private market, the profit margin is about 20%. So a lot of that money is going in profit. We have a facility that's been waiting to be opened in my ward for quite some time. I struggle now to explain to residents who live near to it why it's not open yet. Once it opens, not only will it save this council a lot of money, but it'll also provide, I think, a much better level of care for those children. So can you tell us, when's it going to open?
Councillor Kendrick.
I can't tell you an exact date because the reason it's not open is that, like all new care homes, it has to be inspected and adjudged to be an appropriate place, and we wait on the authorities who do the inspections to come and inspect it, despite us asking. No one more than me wants it open, because certainly we have children and young people who are out of area who would do well in that home as soon as we can open it. We ask regularly. We are at the hands of those who come and look at registrations and inspections.
Supplementary? Or was that a supplementary? No, thank you very much. Councillor Smith? We could get to the motion depending on the length of your question.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Are we on item 14, so questions to committees? Or 30, because I'm getting confused.
Still on.
Yeah. Okay, so to Councillor Pandor, could you give Council an update on the latest scrutiny item that was conducted at the Growth and Regeneration Scrutiny Panel, please?
Yes, I can. I had my first meeting and we talked about transport and highways. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. It does concern me, and I have previously mentioned this, that someone who's instrumental in setting the policies and the plans in place as leader of this council over a long period of time is actually marking the homework in terms of chairing the scrutiny. Can I ask what your personal view is on your role in this? Thank you.
I will tell you my personal view outside this council chamber because this council meeting is for the council business. So I'm happy to share you my personal views afterwards. Thank you very much.
Okay, item 14 is completed. Item 15, motion under Council Procedure Rule 14 as to the ending of the practice of using Council Street furniture for the displaying of election posters. Councillor Hall.
I'm delighted to be able to get to this motion, which has been the order on the order paper since July. I shall move it swiftly. We can perhaps swiftly second it, and then up to perhaps it's your discretion to move to the vote, Mr. Mayor, and then we can get it done by 9 o'clock, if that's acceptable. We've had a long-standing concern about the use of election posters on lampposts, and I remember talking to the then leader of the council, or one former leader of the council, some years ago, a Labour member, and the conversation went something like, why do you bother putting all these posters up? Because they don't do anything. And he said to me, we put them up because you put them up. So I said, well, why don't we just not put them up then? Save all the paper, save all the plastic, save all the mucking about up and down ladders, which nobody likes doing. And actually, it doesn't actually make a ha'porth of difference. Because it's all over the news every year that there's a local election on. Kirklees does an excellent job letting the public know. There's things everywhere in libraries, on lampposts and everywhere saying there is an election, don't lose your vote, all this business. We really don't need party political posters making the place look very scruffy. And indeed, some of which stay up for months. And not mine. Months and months and years. I presume you've reported it then, Councillor Pinnick. No, you haven't. All right then. And so, simply put, we think it would save an awful lot of officers' time, it would save the political parties an awful lot of time, it would save us an awful lot of money, and it would save an awful lot of grief responding to residents who don't like the things if we just said, like many other councils, the majority of councils, we won't put posters on street furniture. So I move the motion. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Is that seconded? Councillor Bellamy?
Seconded and reserved the right.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor Scott, quickly.
Like it or you don't, so we won't be supporting your motion. So I think that it's about freedom of choice, and I think if it's your choice, your democratic right to advertise the fact that you're standing for elections. So thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Just to add, I didn't put them up. I still won. We didn't put them up for Hannah. Hannah still won. We won't put them up this year, and we'll still take Tim out. So don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. No other questions. Right of reply, Councillor Hall. No?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now vote electronically.
So, you know when you're closing the vote, can you say?
You've got 10 seconds and then we'll close it. 10 seconds, make your decision. Why do I keep doing that? I keep pressing that. Thank you very much. Time is up. 4, 9 abstentions, 1. Guys, please. Against 40. The motion is not carried. Thank you for that. Item 20. Response to motion Small Business Saturday, to receive and note the response of the Minister for Enterprise, Markets and Small Business to the motion of Council approved on the 15th of November 2023 as to Small Business Saturday. That was for noting. Thank you. Well, we did. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attendance, your contributions. Please exit by Ramsden Street. Enjoy your evening. Thank you very much.